Good morning. Welcome to Stories of Dave. I'm going to take a little a break from Hokey Pokey today and start working on some essays. Start reading some essays rather, and talking about some concepts that I don't know. I think could use addressing. This is a singing stone. This is a gift that was given to me by an old friend of mine named Jim Disbrow, who is a geologist extraordinaire. And a linguist also. He was a lot of things, typical Berkeley grad from the late 60s. Multi-talented. But his main gig was geology, and he explained to me the concept of the singing stones one day outside of a conference where he and my wife were presenting together on topics scientific and environmental. And he gave me this piece, and he held it up against the ridge line of the section of the Blue Ridge Mountains where we were, and it happened to coincide exactly with the shape of the local ridge there. As he showed me that, he told me the story of how the native clans, pre-Columbian native clans, had singing stones that, according to the ritual and the practice and the belief, these singing stones related to a family. Each family had their own stone, and there were troughs at places in the river, and still are in the Shenandoah and in the Rapidan and other local rivers. You can find places where there's kind of a granite shelf or a natural sluice or sort of table, which if you were to place one of these stones on it in the right current, stone tumbles down the rock and sings. And the medicine woman, the keeper of the library for the clan, would interpret the songs of these stones for the various families. She was responsible for keeping the stones as well. There was a keeper of the tribe's narrative history and of the stones that produced its guidance. At any rate, I'll always think of Jim when I think of this stone. He, as I said, he was also a linguist. He was tasked at some point years ago during the Barack Obama administration. He was tapped with a contract job to go to Saudi Arabia in search of Wahhabist versions of the Quran that were in many places considered verboten, but which were most certainly rare. And it was a project that he approached with the usual sort of childlike curiosity of your typical, should I say, honest Ivy League academic, by which I mean people who don't have a political agenda. They have their intellectual fascinations and bliss, and they pursue that. And I think often those people get leveraged by the powers that be in ways that even they don't understand at the time. At any rate, he was tasked with finding this rare copy of Wahhabist copy of the Quran, and then caught COVID during the first week of the announced epidemic. I think it was in April or May of 20, on his little ranchito tucked way back into the Blue Ridge Mountains. So in other words, very little human contact, and he was that way by choice. But he perished of COVID right there at the beginning. I have a feeling a lot of people who had a lot of special information went away during the first months of that epidemic when everyone was dying. Remember? So at any rate, thinking about this the other day inspired me to say some words about the Canon. A few years ago, one of our elite universities that was founded by the former, not slave owner, mind you, but slave trader, billionaire elite slave trader, Elihu Yale. This institution has decided that they will no longer allow students to pursue canonical studies in English. In other words, the canon is dead. Well, what's the canon? Well, the canon is the clan library of singing stones. It's the story that we tell ourselves about ourselves over time. It helps us understand who we are, helps us develop our identity, hang on to our identity, warts and all. You know, you don't erase history, you try to learn from it, do better next time, right? So it occurred to me also, before I lose my way, this decision about the canon was made only a few years ago, and yet I think the work had already been being done for decades to try to essentially crush any idea of an American identity, especially among young men. And you know, to that end, I was at a head shop, I don't know, a couple months ago. There was a young man behind the counter, and I mentioned the title of my novella to him and told him what it was about. And usually when I tell people that, I get a good laugh. He didn't laugh at all. He was entirely humorless. What's more, he was eager to let me know that he was in fact an English major at VCU. And I mentioned something about travels with Charlie, and he said he was almost sure he had heard of John Steinbeck somewhere or other. That should scare you. At any rate, so I'd like to read a couple of essays that pertain to the canon and the importance of a canon. One, of course, the obvious one is the availability, the commonality of metaphor. We as a people who live in close community need to have the same well of metaphors to draw from if we're going to communicate effectively. And if we're going to communicate in a way that's meta and that gets beyond the pain of simple miscommunication, then we need to do what we can to preserve the idea of a canon. This whole concept that it's somehow egalitarian to get rid of it is nonsense. All that does is confuse your sense of identity, and lead to a state of cultural chaos like the one that we're in right now. So on that note, with regard to metaphor, this is a sophomoric preachy POS that I wrote back in, I believe it was 2003, 2004. It was my immediate response to W. Bush's Axis of Evil speech. But it's a demonstration of how an understanding of the canon can enable commonality of understanding on a topic. Yeah? So without further ado, indulge me. Again, I was young. This one's Transitioning the Monster, or Building a House of Cards from a Loaded Deck, a Letter of Opinion by D.F. Vandevelder. This was never run, of course, no one would touch it. Before you read Richard Clarke's book, read or reread Golding's The Lord of the Flies. There are few better texts through which to frame the dynamics of our current war on terrorism, or indeed through which to understand the gravity of what Mr. Clarke has articulated about it. In The Lord of the Flies, the character of Jack, who becomes the leader of the warrior tribe, destroys almost every vestige of decent, civilized human society in order to effectively create, maintain, and transition a monster. Yes, transition a monster. Follow me. Jack generates fear. Then he proclaims himself as the very savior from fear, the source and substance of rationality and security. So far, so good. But when the power of his myth wanes, when the children discover that what they had believed to be a monster was really a dead pilot, Jack is quick to maintain hegemony through his monster myth. See Hitler, Adolf. See Eichmann, Adolf. See Einsatzgruppen. Having fanned the flames of fear back to life, Jack assures his constituents that the monster can take any shape and can and will come back at any time. His plan works. He knows that if you can make a man afraid enough, he will do anything, believe anything, trade anything for the promise of security. The Bush administration transitioned the monster from bin Laden to Hussein so fast and so seamlessly, parentheses, and what chutzpah to go after North Korea and Iran in the same grand conflation of other culture, monsters in reserve, you see. It can return at any time in any shape, close parentheses. That it might as well have been done with high-end image morphing software. Though Condi Rice still assures us in a voice a full octave higher, and from eyes that belie real panic, and in language more befitting a jilted sorority girl than a power player in the executive, that it is the same monster. Mr. Clark's book is important, or disastrous, depending on how close your seats are to the stage, because it slows down what effectively has been an elaborate magic trick designed to transition a monster. Now we see the process, the smoke and mirrors of a war contrived from thin air. And now we begin to see the Uber agenda. That's what's caused such a stir among the Gang of Five this week. Bush is never concerned with terrorism beyond how it could enable the internal links of a logic necessary to prepare the nation to go to war long term for control of the oil under the Caspian Sea. But until now, the evidence of that truth has been relatively easy to control. How can I make such an assertion? Well, one, precedent. Only half a century after the fact can we admit to ourselves that the powers that be under FDR knew full well of an imminent attack coming from Japan. They sat on their hands in order to sway a markedly isolationist American public. Two, Homeland Security is a joke and a grim embarrassment to everyone involved. Our borders are porous, and W plans to keep it that way. Our airports are hardly any more secure, and there are any number of tourists at large, 1,200 at the last count, whom the folks at immigration assure us have ties to militant Islamic groups. In short, it's difficult to believe that Homeland Security has been the real priority of this administration. Three, we are fighting what they would assure us is a new kind of war, and yet we're doing so with all the old tools. Mr. Bush poses with a deck of cards to assure us that this is a linear battle with fixed parameters and an array of static achievable objectives. Then Condi Rice assures us that the new enemy is mobile and polymorphic and decentralized, and therefore very dangerous. Such an enemy will require us to go kick ass in any country we believe isn't towing the line well enough. Voila! New sort of war, old sort of tools. Could that have anything to do with the money available to those involved in the manufacture of those old tools? Why, if it's a new kind of war, are we not fighting it in a new kind of way? Why did this administration not request a repeal of the law prohibiting our executive from taking contracts out on troublesome heads of state, for instance? It seems to me that the dynamics of this new war on terrorism would necessitate more covert, less overt action, more Delta teams and fewer tanks, more intelligence and less logistics. But that would cripple captains of industry from firms like Lockheed and Bell Labs, and those people fund elections. Who will the monster transition to next? That's the question every voting American must ask this coming election season. Who will the monster status transition to next? And will fighting that monster make us more secure? Or will it line the pockets of the priests of the oil and war industry, all at the expense of a future American security on planet Earth? And while we all consider that question, we should do our level best to ignore that mellifluous, authoritative voice urging us to pay no attention to the man behind the curtain.